A message from the unconscious to the individual, sent billions of times daily, nightly, but always different, addressed each time to one individual only, tailored to him or her for that individual's present situation in life. For me personally, the dream is the continuation of the Lord's Supper, the persistence of the Eucharist. I don't mean the collective Eucharist as it is celebrated in the community or in public, rather, a second one that takes place in secret, the nightly host of the dream, which is given to us in the tameion, in the storeroom of sleep, the inner room that Jesus demands as the place of secret communion between each individual and God. But receiving the host of the dream, on the tongue of the dreamer, so to speak, is not enough. How do I take it into myself? How do I engage with the dream that was given to me? Do I even ask why it came to me, why it came to me now, this very night? Or do I disregard it, forget it carelessly, or spit it out consciously as indigestible, even poisonous, and thus repress it? How do I digest what I saw in the dream? How do I make it my own? How do I then, in response to the given host of the dream, this is the most important step, how do I then give the dream a human measure of realization so that the symbolic meaning of the dream, which I have uncovered in my examination of it, finds lively and invigorating realization in everyday life? As your examples show, people superficially refer to all human wishes as dreams, but such wishful notions are usually not products of the unconscious and not something depth psychology refers to as dreams. Rather, the term here refers to entirely conscious ego wishes. For instance, Mr. X dreams of a vacation in the Caribbean, or he desires this or that car and calls it his dream car. Genuine dreams are only in very rare cases wish fulfillments. To the naive person who cares little about interpreting a dream's content in depth, dreams seem to work with deception. The dream has deceived me if it doesn't come true. Hence, the etymological meaning of dream from the German word Trug, which means deception, deceit. In reality, however, most dreams have a compensatory function. But just what is being compensated? For that, we need the context, at least the current situation of the dreamer and his or her associations to the dream images. A woman dreamed of a huge villa in Hollywood where she finds herself. In awe, she walks through dozens of rooms, through larger spaces across multiple floors, all richly furnished. And somehow she knows, this is my house. It all belongs to me. That was the dream. Now, it all depends on the dreamer's situation. What is her everyday reality like? Indeed, she had no major financial worries, but There could be no talk of external wealth. You see, she said, the dream is nonsense. It's showing me something false. In her case, however, the wealth referred to an inner wealth, namely the wealth of her unconscious, which she had always downplayed and whose images she, because she didn't know how to read them, taking them literally instead of symbolically, had dismissed as deceptive nonsense. For example, she did not trust her own creative potential. In her case, the dream compensated for this negative assessment. But depending on the dreamer's everyday situation and conscious attitude, the same dream could also mean that the person is living completely unrealistically, deluding him or herself, indulging in fairy tale fantasies, and thus adopting an inflated attitude toward reality. Only an interpretation that takes the personal context into account can discern this and make the distinction. The compensatory function of dreams was already recognized by some people 3,000 years ago. For instance, I can refer you to a tremendous passage in Job, chapter 33. Recently, a friend dreamed of descending a staircase in a gloomy underground parking garage. The steps were particularly large. After the third step, she's only barely able to hold on at that moment. She realizes she's at the edge of a pitch black abyss yawning before her. Terrified, she pulls herself back up by the railing. Now, in principle, this is the same abyss spoken of in that biblical Job passage. The dreamer is shocked by the vivid imagery in order to keep her soul from the pit, from the fatal step. The pit, that's the quote from Job, the pit could, for example, represent a nihilistic worldview that she had unconsciously, step by step, been slipping into. Probably the dreams of Joseph in the New Testament, especially his first dream, which overturns Joseph's plan, his wish to dismiss the pregnant Mary. Joseph's dream compensates his conscious attitude, his intentions, his plans. Now, I see in Joseph's acceptance of the dream's message a fertilization by the divine, which, parallel to the incarnation in Mary, takes place in Joseph's soul. Joseph, too, must carry to term, with all its consequences, what has seized him in the dream, must bring this spiritual content to reality. Joseph's response to the dream is exemplary. I describe this in all its drama, for Joseph's response is a journey between the opposites, first in Lichternacht, Night of Lights, my Christmas story, and then in my novel, Sunrise, the Book of Joseph. Let me turn the question around. I don't use them. The dreams use me. They find expression this way. They can be reflected upon in the book, reread, and can newly affect others. As a writer, I usually describe archetypal dreams. In their authenticity, they seek not only to convey a symbolic meaning that concerns me alone, but images that potentially affect many people. In Sunrise, the book of Joseph, it hasn't been translated yet, there's a chapter entitled The Crucible. It deals with a dream vision Joseph has. He sees a shattered vessel, a broken crucible that he is commanded by God to piece together again. There's nothing personal here. It is the archetypal religious vessel that was and is, then as now, broken for the sake of transformation and is now to be resurrected. In the first part of the dream, I see parallels to Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the giant statue being shattered by a stone in the book of Daniel, an image symbolizing the downfall of ruling consciousness. You'll find similar imagery in my book, Starlight Terrace, 4 stories of individuation that take place in Los Angeles today. Your question reminds me of a sermon by the American Episcopal Bishop Marianne Edgar Buddy, who, at the president's inauguration, pleaded for mercy on behalf of the many the administration seeks to marginalize, to frighten, or deport. She wrote a book on sermons and preaching. Its title speaks to me. It's called Gather the Fragments. Now, this title reminds me of Joseph's work on the new crucible, the new vessel, for which he is to gather the shattered fragments and, with his soul and spirit on fire, piece them together anew. Gather the fragments. Also reminds me of the leftover fragments of bread that are being collected by Jesus' disciples after the feeding of the 5,000. That are being collected, present tense. For if I understand Buddy correctly, I've only read an excerpt so far, but her deed speaks volumes. She says, this is where we must begin, even as preachers, and I might add, even as patients, as artists, and yes, even as analysts. We must begin with our fragments, our remnants. When we experience distress, disorientation, our being broken, being scattered or shattered by times and events, these our fragments should not be forgotten and left lying, but should be patiently gathered. Gathering always implies an ordering, and therefore a center that gives direction, and therefore gives meaning. A meaning that perhaps only emerges when we take pity on our fragments. Gather your least of these broken ones within you. The image in Matthew 14:20 attributes the fragment when gathered, to a miracle. A fragment would thus be a trace of a miracle that has just occurred, of a transformation of the host as it was offered to us last night in our dream, that dream of which we remember only a leftover fragment. It is up to us to gather it and be transformed with it.